Now that we know a little bit more about the request and the response cycle, let us go back and let us try to do a couple of more experiments. So I am inside my code editor, and the first thing that I want to play with is inside our views. So I am inside the polls application and inside the module of views. Let me collapse my sidebar. So what we can do is, let us delete all of these things and let us try to write the view right from scratch. So if I have to ask you what is a view, so you can say that view is simply a function which takes a request and which gives back a response. So let us define a function, and you can name the function anything that you want. In our case, we are going to name the function as index. Now again, as I said, our view function should accept a request. So we can say that this is going to accept one parameter which is called as request. Let us also try to include the type hinting so that all of the things are much clearer for us. So let me go to the top, and here I can say that from Django.http I want to import HTTP request. So this parameter right over here, this request, the type of this request is going to be an HTTP request. Now this view function has to give back a response. Now in our case, we are going to give back a response which is of the format of HTTP response. So first let me import right over here, and here I can say that okay fine, this function is going to return back a HTTP response. So let us go to the next line. Since we have to return something, so we can just simply say return, and let us create the object of our response, and inside of this just let us write something. So we can just say welcome to our polls app. Now let me save the file, and let us go back and let us run our server. So let me open up my terminal, and here again I can say that python manage.py run server, and let me open up my site. Again we get a 404 because we have not defined any path for the root. So let me go to my polls, and here we can see that we get the message saying that welcome to our polls application. Now suppose we want to create some more views and some more URLs. So for example, if we want to create a poll and if we want to see the details, and we want our URL to be something like this, polls/details. So in this case, how do we do it? How do we create a view and how do we create a URL to handle this pattern? So let us see. So first let us go back and let us try to write a view function that can handle this situation. Let me go to the next line, and here I can create one more function. Again, you can name the function anything that you want. So since the URL or the route is dedicated for my polls detail, that's why I'm also going to name my view function as detail, but you can name it anything that you want. Here I can say that again, since this is a view, it has to accept one HTTP request and it has to give back an HTTP response. So here I can say that let us send back an HTTP response, and here we can say that this is our polls details page. Now if we go back and if we try to refresh, nothing is going to happen. So what's missing? We have the view but we don't have the URL. So let us go back and let me open up my sidebar. So again, inside my polls application, I have to go to my URLs. Now here we need to create one URL pattern that will match our path. So on the next line, what I can do is I can say that I want to create a new path, and this time I want to match to the URL of details. Always make sure that you put the / right over here, otherwise the pattern will not match. And after this, we have to say that okay fine, whenever you get this pattern, we want to invoke a very specific function, and that function is inside our module of views, and the name of the function is detail. The next parameter is called as the name. So what happens in Django is you can actually name your URLs, And naming of this URLs is very important when you work with templates, or if you want to do with testing, or if you want to get a reverse from an URL and so many other things. So this name will always point towards this specific URL. So here again we can name the name as anything, but since this URL is dedicated for the details page, so let us write the name as details. Now let us go back to our application, and if I try to refresh the page, so here it is, we get a response saying that polls detail page. Let us do some more experiments. So let me go back to my views file. Now till this time we have been seeing that how do we return an HTTP response. But what happens if you are working on an API application? In that case, you can also send back a JSON response. So let me go to the top again, and here I want to import my JSON response. Now, if you don't know how to work with JSON response, then the first thing that we need to do is we need to again go back to the Django documentation. So again, let me go to the top. So again, if you don't remember, so this is the Django website, which is djangoproject.com, and just click on documentation and click on part number 1. So here we are. Now let us do a very simple thing. Let us ask Django for the JSON response, and let us see if we can get some kind of documentation. So I can say I want to search for my JSON response, and as you can see we get a couple of results. So let's click on the first one. Now if you see that this documentation page is dedicated for the request and the response objects. So let us scroll a little down, and if you see on the right, here we can see that we have an HTTP response object. Let us go a little more down, and here we can find a JSON response. So let us click on this, and if we scroll a little bit down, they are also showing how to use your JSON response. And this is the path, django.http, from where you can import the JSON response. So that's what we did. And this is how you create a JSON response. So let us do one thing. Let us go back to our file, and let us try to change this one from an HTTP response to a JSON response. So what we want to do is, instead of just showing these details, let us try to send some JSON data to our detail view. So here let us create a variable called as data, and let us create one dictionary. Suppose we have a field for the ID, and the ID could be 1. Next field we have for the username, we can say that the username is Octallium, and then we can say tutorial, and then we can say this tutorial is for the Django Polls application. Then we can say one last field for the language, and here we can say that the language is going to be Python. And what we have to do is, instead of returning an HTTP response, let us send the JSON response back. And here if you see the documentation, we just have to give back a data, and in our case the data is the variable that we created right over here. So I simply have to pass my variable to the JSON response. Let us save the file, let us go back to our browser, and let us try to refresh the page. And here you can find we get the JSON response back. Now I'm using Firefox, that's why I get this kind of a response. If you are using Chrome, maybe you may have some different format, but the important thing to note is that if we are getting a JSON response back or not. Well, that's it for this video, and I will catch you in the next one.